Hello everybody, we are here and we're going to be looking at Maru. Why he's such a god? How the hell did he win 3 GSL finals this year? He's insane, and we actually have the amazing pleasure of looking at his GSL replays here. So we're actually hopping in mid-series. We don't want to watch every single game. We don't want to watch every single match, and the reason for that is very clear. It was an epic long finals. If you want to watch the whole finals, of course, go check it out in the GSL matches. But we're going to be talking about, TY's story, I think, this year, and how he went from being such a great player to being, honestly, the scariest, just most out there player in terms of his range of strategy and his ability to scare the living crap out of his opponents. And let's talk about exactly why. Look at this. Look at this. This is Maru, game number 4. He's down 1-2 versus TY. It's the GSL Season 3 Grand Finals. And he's going to stop SCV production after his first 2 SCVs, get 2 proxy barracks on 14 supply with a fast gas. It's going to be a proxy double Reaper barracks. And this on its own is not that crazy, especially for Maru. It's the fact that he did this game number 1. It's that game number 2, he did another 1-base proxy. It was a reacted factory cyclone push. In both of those games, TY, this legend over here, the best strategic defensive player, one of the best defensive players and the best late game players, managed to block them. Maru got into the mid game on an almost even footing. He wasn't too far behind, and TY countered with an incredibly tight timing push. Overwhelmed Maru before Maru could really catch up in all of his upgrades and so on, and just knocked him out of the game. It was a very clear, simple 2-0 advantage. Maru's cheesy proxy rushes weren't working. And at the point where TY no doubt expected Maru to go and do something a bit more conservative, he did yet another proxy barracks Reaper in game number 3. It was on, of course, the big map, which name is eluding me right now. He got in. TY was playing a little bit greedier, but TY made 1 or 2 micro mistakes, lost his first Reaper, lost his first Hellion. And Maru, without deviating from the most all-in aggressive plays in all of the first 3 maps, finally managed to take a map. Now here in game number 4, Maru is not going to blink twice. He is going to dive into TY's main base with yet another psychopath rush. Bloody double 14 barracks Reaper. This is the most aggressive you can get. And to do it, especially after being down 0-2, yet now to start finding some headway with these rushes, this is Maru in a nutshell. He absolutely never blinks twice. He never second guesses himself. But TY is so good at defense. Look at this Reaper running circles around this mineral line. The Hellion and the other Marine come out. This Reaper on the Reddit points. It's adding damage, but didn't let itself get focused down until it had killed off a lot of Maru's Reapers. Yet another Reaper goes down, and Maru's rush has been held. He's got 5 worker kills. It's not terrible by any means. But yet again, TY is going to stabilize, and he's actually proxied a starport on the other side of the map. He immediately queues up a Liberator to counter pressure, knowing that Maru has all of his production on the other side of the map. At best, Maru will have a single Cyclone out, which takes forever to kill 1 Liberator. And this is why Maru is so goddamn scary. He's just, he will keep cheesing. He will keep cheesing, and he'll keep doing it. He will build his buildings on your side of the map, and he will bring that tempo. And the reason for this is, I think what's so impressive about Maru's displays of skills, and he's quite a contrast to someone like Serral, who's also just, been astronomically powerful this year. But Maru has come in, and what he really displays is some of the messiest games. For a player who's arguably the best player in the world right now, Maru is the guy who makes the most mistakes. And that's not because he's playing bad, it's because he messes the game up so much, and that's his comfort zone. Maru wants to be in a messy game. It's where he distinguishes himself from his opponents. It's where he takes any powerful units or matchup balance that are giving other players problems, and he equalizes it. He just, in these scrappy games, even here, look at this bloody Liberator, 5 kills, so much lost mining time. Finally, that single Cyclone is able to clear it up. But it's in these games where Maru distinguishes himself, because he is so flexible, so adaptable, and he's so good at reading the play and adjusting to what's going on in that particular game. At this moment, He knows there's a proxy starport, and he goes scouting to check what the follow-up is, and he finds this Hellion drop. Imagine if he didn't scout that. These Hellions could have roasted his entire main mineral line, but this gives him time for the Cyclones to get up there. They're going to do big damage to this medevac. TY being very clever, trying to distract, but there's not that many kills units on the low ground. TY is going to grab a few Reapers. These are still fantastic adjustments and maneuvers from TY. Gets an SCV, but that is not the same as roasting. Even just 5 or 6 workers at this point, when you're on such a low worker count, would be devastating. And what's really cool as this game goes on, and we're going to get to it, we're also going to look at the last game of the series, because that's another spectacular display of Maru's poise under pressure. But this game is so cool because we get to see the scariest part of Maru a bit later in this game. It's the fact that we've all heard Artosis, one of our favorite analytical commentators, talk about how the scariest thing a cheesy player can do is play a macro game. And the funny thing is we don't think of Maru as a cheesy player, and yet he really is. He proxies like more than half of his games at the moment. His buildings almost never go in his base. He likes to do aggressive gambles. What's so impressive is, well, number one, even when you think it's an all-in attack that needs to do game-ending damage, he somehow finds a way to transition out of it because he's so flawless at executing his micro, and then also adding expansions and expanding behind it. But it's not just that, it's the fact that Maru, in certain situations, when he's forced to it, will play the end game. He will play the late game, and he does it pretty much better than anyone else. I remember we saw the first flashes of Maru's brilliance with late game control, and his ability to use these ultra weird late game armies no other Terrans were using back in 2016, early Legacy of the Void. I remember games on Prion Terraces against Zerg players where he would go into Mass Ghost Liberator, a composition no one else was using at the time, and these Zergs like Dark, the best player in the world, almost undisputed at that point. Dark is very good at the moment, but he was even better in 2016, guys. Many of his fans say that he got cheated from winning that BlizzCon finals to do with Reapers. But, you know, he was wrecking players like Dark, and Dark had no idea what to do against it. So Maru's this guy who, over the years, he's shown great range in his play. And we saw the first glimpses of him occasionally doing this Mass Ghost Liberator late game play and wrecking these top players back then. But the thing is, we've seen it recently so many times in his Terran verse Zerg. I think it really came into power with the Raven period. You guys remember where there were Raven spamming anti-armor missiles, which apparently were anti-everything missiles because they were literally impossible to dodge. Oh, that Banshee goes down. But yeah, he was just showing such good play in the late game there for quite a while. And what's really cool is when he realizes he needs to turtle up, he really does very well. This is an example of that. He feels like he knows he's kind of a bit behind in tech and so on in this game. You know, he knew TY defended pretty well. TY built his third base on location to catch up in economy. Maru's having to float his down, and Maru's just playing very carefully. But he did go out with 2 Banshees there. Managed to get a bunch of worker kills. Other than that, though, Maru senses that he does not have the same sort of mobility and not necessarily the same tech unit count as TY. TY right now, up 11 army supply, is definitely had map control for a while. His Hellions have been spotting anything, and Maru is just kind of sat back, and he's only going to poke out a lot with these small squads of units, and he's done this so many times against Zerg, especially against Su, I think are his most memorable games, where Su, such a master of the early to mid game, often gets up 40 to 50 supply, sometimes 60, 70 supply on Maru in the mid game. And Maru realizes he's behind, pulls into his shell, builds planetary fortresses, turrets, tanks, walls, and he just tries to hang on. He just absolutely tries to hang on, and he does it so well. He uses the defensive power of Terran, he gives up the map, and he says, it's okay. You might think of me as the guy who tries to kill you with a proxy. I am, and I will go for those easy wins every single time. But when he comes up against a Su or a TY, someone who's able to block those pushes, he is just as capable of completely switching gears and going into the supreme late game. And the reason I chose this map to look at, especially, is not only because we're gonna see some of the big capital ships later on, but it's because TY is an absolute master of late game himself. Let's look at this. TY here, just bullying his way in. He's picking off siege tanks. He's positioning his way around, trying to find an opening. But Maru here, just so patient, finds 2 tanks on the right-hand side, drops 3 auto turrets, and he's going to take those siege tanks out. At the same time, though, TY comes in with a cyclone drop. These Vikings are looking for snipes on those Ravens, but Maru, he's babysitting these Ravens so well. He's keeping them back. Those Cyclones kill a few SCVs, but they had to pull up into that drop. So TY's chipping away, he's doing little bits of damage. But what's really cool is a lot of aggressive players in this scenario, they over-focus on their micro and try to crush the attack. They feel a sense of urgency to get back out on the map and to shut this down because they feel like they're taking too much damage. Maru doesn't do that. What you're going to notice throughout this game is there's certain fights which he screws up on and doesn't do that well on, but he is so aware of where his advantages will end up lying in this game. He knows if he's going to win this game, does go and catch that drop. Very, very nice. It's going to be with upgrades, and it's going to be with lots of air units. It's going to be with very slowly taking a 4th, and then a 5th, and then a 6th base. And it's going to be in that drawn-out scenario. He's not looking to just have 20 more Marines jump on his opponent tanks, TY's tanks, and get in there. But there we go. Takes out the Ravens and Vikings, has air control. And what have we got? We've got the armory coming down there. We've got a 4th command center that's going to be starting up. And he's just poking around with a couple of Cyclones, just scouting, looking for counter damage. But we're not going to really see Maru deviate from the defensive position much in this game. He's going to branch out with squads of Marines, squads of units, but he's not going to be able to actually finish, go out there with some big all-in maneuver. And that's the funny thing is, it's just, we talk about flexibility in StarCraft, and there's players who are very good at being flexible and shifting gears. It's just very rare to see a player who shifts gears from trying to kill their opponent as early as possible to being so extremely patient. Like, we often see players say, okay, I'm going to macro up a little bit and then hit you with a big timing after being a little bit greedy. Hit you with a big 3 or 4 base attack. But Maru is just like, no, I'm just going to camp. I'm just going to chill. You see, he'll branch out with what we would consider a relatively safe drop. Unfortunately, he gets spotted by that Marine, and we see TY obviously saw it was going to be coming and just stims in and gets 2 full medevacs. Oh, what seemed like a very safe little pressure that was going to move out on the map while sitting in his shell. Maru loses a whole ton of supply there, and 20 supply of bio and medevacs, never the funnest thing to lose. But Maru's not stressed. Check it out, guys. Second factory's up, pumping those tanks out. Marines are going. We've got a 2nd starport in the main, 2-2 on the way, vehicle weapons. Oh, what's this? A 4th is going down, a 5th is building on location. TY here wants to do damage. He wants to find angles. He's playing almost a more traditional TVT style. He's like, yeah, let's leverage these angles. Maru is so confident in his own defensive abilities that he's just going to try and sit back and hang on for now. So these Marines here are going to get pushed back. That command center does survive. TY was looking for an angle on the other side of the map. Maru's like, nope. I'm going to win much later in this game. 2 more starports are on the way, tech labs. And he knows, he never seems to panic and kind of A-move his entire army in one direction. He leaves tanks spread out all over the place. He's very good at taking care of his Vikings and Ravens. These are a big part of his play. And the only time he does quote-unquote risky maneuvers is when he moves out with these squads of Marines. And he'll kind of poke around because these are the most mobile unit. He scans ahead a lot of the time with them. I think we'll probably see a scan here because he doesn't know what he's walking to. Okay, he'll just send a few Marines ahead, but he can stim them. He can evacuate at any moment. He can maneuver those however he wants. And we see him just kind of taking his time with this game. So we were talking earlier about how this is so interesting because we think of TY as the master of late game. So to give you guys a little bit of history, TY, as early as, I guess, early 2017, so a year and a half ago, was already doing what we see in the worker tab here. Every game, TY would go to 85, sometimes even 90 workers. And this was kind of obscene at the time. Because the common thought, what we as experts and what the professional gamers all thought was, well, your bases mine out very quickly in Legacy of the Void. It's hard to really keep enough mining for more than about 65 workers. Especially as Terran, where you've got mules. You'd see some Terran players like Alive sometimes just sit on 55 workers all game long. They'd just chill. Because they'd say, well, if I lose a base and I'm up on 75, 80 workers, like, I just don't have anywhere to mine from. TY, on the other hand, rather than being focused on trying to win in that middle stage, he kind of redefined the late game by going to 85, sometimes 90 workers every game, doing a lot more small tactical harassment, and being very careful to use his defender's advantage and try to play that out. We see a nice little Marine push forward from both sides. Maru, of course, says, that's too many units. My units have Dorito dust all over them. Get the hell out of here. He's going to back off. So yeah, so TY basically popularized this style where people were like, well, your army's going to be too small. Surely you'll just lose a maxed fight. But TY used micro, positioning, defender's advantage. He used harassment. And over time, his opponents would run out of money, and he would still have way more money. So TY kind of redefined the macro game about 6-8 months after he'd been doing that non-stop. Every other player, Zerg, Terran, and Protoss, when they were in a macro game, where they weren't just going for one particular big tight attack, when they actually were kind of going for more reactive strategy, we would see players always go to 85 workers. And this was fascinating, because it totally changes the dynamic, where players can lose an army and actually remax. Players are also very afraid, though, of committing with everything. When you get up to 86 or 92 workers like in this game, you can't move your whole army out, because if you get it caught in the open, caught in a bad position, and it goes down, you're going to be in huge trouble. Because, as we said, you've got so much supply in workers, your army's not that big. You don't have that much room for error. You lose 30 army supply, it's catastrophic if they can immediately jump on you and engage the rest of your army. So it's a lot more about being very carefully and drawing out the fights. Now we're going to see a bit of skirmishes here. TY once again looking for angles, and Maru very happy to just be the defender. Both players very afraid to engage there with the Viking Raven count. The way you take these battles is you drop the Dorito cannon, aka anti-armor missile in your opponent's units, try to spread your own stuff out, and you just kind of A-move. And of course, the Viking upgrades are relatively key. We can see here, +1 ship weapons for TY, +1 vehicle, which is vehicle and ship plating for Maru. So Maru's actually a little bit behind on those upgrades. Both players adding in a good amount of Ravens. Now here's a really cool maneuver from Maru. TY's entire army was on the left-hand side of the map. He did not have a lot of supply free to build more units, so Maru just boosted straight through the center of the map, 4 full medevacs. He's already managed to kill 4 Ravens here, which is fantastic. Gets 1 armory, and he's going to snipe the other armory. And that's the balls of Maru there. Maru, realizing his opponent was at a point in the game where he's very immobile, goes in and gets some high-value targets. Losing these Marines, not that big. Slowing down those upgrades, on the other hand, is fantastic. At the same time, he's going to hunt down some tanks on the left. And what's funny here is Maru is actually quicker to build extra command centers than TY. TY's got extra orbitals there. He's expanding to the top left. But Maru's keeping pace with him at the very least, and he's consistently ahead in workers. And because of Maru's confidence in his defensive setup and kind of staying at home with his tanks, we often see him committing to more Marines than TY in this game. And we're going to see the cost efficiency going in his favor because of things like that drop. Whenever he finds an opening, as these players get stretched out across these vast distances, the mobility of the Marines are very good. Obviously, the Marines are bad at engaging into a tank line. They're not good at engaging into those anti-armor missiles either. But the moment you catch your opponent out of position, the Marines become very useful. And if we look at that unit tab, we're going to look at that a few more times. We're going to check in on that at various stages over the next 10 minutes in this game. It can really show an advantage to Maru in Marine count. Now, once again, TY takes an incredible set of anti-armor missiles, and Maru just pulls back the command center, immediately disengages. TY trying to deny this side of the map. He says, look, I've got the top left. If I can just secure that and deny this side, I'm going to win this game. Starting to build missile turrets to support this as well. We've got those double ship weapon upgrades for both sides on the way as well. But here we go. The tanks left on their own. The turret's not quite ready. And Maru just grabs a few tanks and pulls back. And the funny thing we find here is it almost feels like TY is trying to force the issue a little bit. He keeps moving forward, but he's a bit paranoid about Maru rotating to the other side of the map each time like he did with that 4 Marine drop. He abandoned those siege tanks. He didn't leave all of his anti-air with them, and they end up just going down for free, and Maru takes a nice trade. Let's look at that units lost tab. And that's crazy to think TY is the guy that invented late game 85 worker, long-term efficiency play with harassment. He's down almost 4,000 resources here at the 19-minute mark. And Maru clearly doesn't feel any pressure to move out. He's so patient. he's adding masses of orbital command centers, which of course allows him to drop mules to mine faster, and then he can eventually sacrifice his SCV, his SCVs, send them across the map, and take take the extra army supply in the later stages of the map. For now, it's just about defending. And of course, he's adding Liberator range. In case he wants Liberators, he's adding Yamato gun, or weapons refit, as it's now called. And we are going to see TY once again. Wants to find an angle. He is so eager to get some damage done here. He wants to deny these bases. But Maru here is just kind of waiting for mistakes. Once again, he's like, oh, tank. All right, yeah, I'll take that out. Oh, we'll take out that tank as well, maybe. He's thinking about it. He's thinking about it. Maru, he's a little bit... Okay, those Marines are a little bit far forward. They went a bit too deep. But these tanks, he's not unsieging them all and trying to move forward and jump on the army. He's never really exposing himself to that risk. And as we said, that fits with this 90 SCV style. The guy who always proxy Raxes and tries to kill you with his first 3 Reapers, apparently he's even more patient than TY is. And that's why this is so scary. TY... I think everyone thought he would win this sort of game if it made it to this stage. But right now, Maru is just being more and more cost efficient. It's just continuing over and over again. 4 tanks poke forward. Once again, Maru very happy to just move a few units forward, see what they can do, pull them back when his opponent shows enough units. Finally, TY says, okay, screw this. I can't seem to break through. Let's come through on this left-hand side. Tries to come in here. Couple of Ravens to shut down tanks, Marines to stim forward. It's a clever attack. Usually there's just a few tanks left on the flanks, but he's losing Ravens. He gets a couple of tanks and a couple of Marines, but it's not really efficient, is it? At the same time, though, a brilliant maneuver, and that's where TY shows his quality. Comes in while he knows Maru's distracted and annihilates so much of the Viking Raven. Now, don't get me wrong, Maru answered there with some incredible missiles of his own, damages those, but that looked like a pretty damned nice trade for TY, and it was very close. If Maru was half a second slower to react, TY probably would have kept on committing to that fight and just taken down all of those Ravens. A Ghost comes forward and EMPs these Ravens. Now we're seeing TY show these beautiful little maneuvers that he's known for. Knocks the energy off those 3 Ravens. And you can see he's got these fancy maneuvers. What's interesting is Maru, we're going to see an inkling that he was thinking about adding Ghosts later. But he's much more focused on just doing this part of the game better. He kind of treats the Ghost as being a little bit overly fancy. And once again, Marine count. 41 Marines to 24. And we're going to see these Marines start looking for some more advantages as this game goes on. Maru's now stabilized his half of the map. So both players have 50% of the bases. And if it stays this way, it's just whoever has the more efficiency. Maru's still leading in that efficiency tab, right? He's going to grab a couple of turrets. A Thor and a Raven are out in the open down here. Grabs another tank as well. Goes a little bit deep forward, but these are just Marines. They're cheap. And at the same time, the mobility of the Marines. Maru is looking for a way to find angles without exposing his Ravens, his tanks, his important gas units to the threat. TY is starting to branch out, but TY is also, I feel, looking just a little bit confused in some of these scenarios. He really seemed like he wanted to use the range Liberators. He's been mixing those in, but they've been consistently dying. Every time the Vikings and Ravens skirmish, the Liberator seems to be just chilling in front of the army, and it dies. So even though TY's had the Viking Raven advantage at a few points in this game, right now, it's near dead even. 13 Ravens apiece, 13 Vikings to 12 Vikings. And 3 Battlecruisers are going to be added in here for TY. It's 3-2 upgrades for TY, 2-3 for Maru, but Maru is slowly adding on a few more upgrades. And now it's SCV sacrifice time. Both players are throwing away their SCVs because they've got so many orbital command centers. They don't need as many workers. As we said earlier, they want more army supply. SCVs, of course, don't get attack upgrades. And that is a 3 siege tank, 3 armored siege tank. So it takes almost no damage from that. And this is where Maru finally starts to edge forward. But what's interesting, once again, is where are the siege tanks? Maru very rarely exposes his siege tanks to risk. He just leaves them spread on the defense. He says, look, the Vikings and Ravens can evacuate if need be. And that's that. At the same time, TY trying a very dangerous Doom drop on the left-hand side. But Maru's found his way into the production, is doing some damage. But look at this, TY. If he can get on the production and take this out, this will be huge. He lost one full medevac to the turrets, though, so that was a problem. But look at that, a ton of siege tanks. Not too many Marines. At the same time, the Vikings and Ravens come forward. Maru's Marines actually take a few Ravens out there. And he's starting to lose some production. So this could work out to be a really nice trade. TY is going to try and evacuate those medevacs, these siege tanks here. But, you know what? Auto turrets and Ravens, pretty good units. Maru comes back and deals with this with mostly energy, doesn't really take any critical damage. At the same time, TY says, okay, your whole army's back there, time to push in on the right-hand side. I want to deny these bases. Remember, Maru always leaving his siege tanks on the defense. He's never exposing himself to the counterattack. He's playing such a careful, slow game here. And over these trades, he's edged another 1,000 or 2,000 resources ahead. Both players sitting on 60 workers now. Once again, Maru is just so patient here. He's just chilling. He's just branching around with Marines. He's leaving his tanks, and he's just making sure his Vikings and Ravens poke forwards, looking for favorable trades, but not overcommitting. He's got so many scans. He can scan the entire map and see exactly where TY is. These Marines over here are going to run in, look for an opening. This is so cool because, yeah, I really thought TY was gonna demolish Maru with the way this series was going. After game 3, I said Maru was being too predictable. If there's one guy, when I was watching this live, and I wasn't really cheering for either player when I was watching this finals. I was like, if there's one guy who's just gonna shut you down for doing the same opening every game, the same proxy barracks, and then just get ahead and like kill you with these brutal timings. Like the first 2 games was so clean from TY. I'm like, it's gonna be TY, man. He's gonna shut this down. But now we see the Battlecruiser switch up from Maru. Maru's adding in his own BCs. And I don't think TY necessarily knew about this just yet. We're finally seeing that Marine count drop down. Maru said, you know what? We found some efficiency with these Marines over this game. I'm still up 7,000, 6,000, what was that? 6,500 resources. He's still building heaps of turrets. He's got his Vikings, he's got his Ravens, and he's adding even more starports. And he's just kind of trying to swap into those Battlecruisers. So Battlecruisers are an interesting unit because when they're on top of the Vikings, they definitely smash them, but Vikings can kite them down and Ravens can lock them down with interference matrix. But their Yamato gun can instantly kill Ravens, instantly kill Thors or siege tanks, instantly kill Vikings. Over the long term, Battlecruisers are very powerful, but also in a battle where there's just not enough Vikings, they can blink on top of your opponent's exposed air army when he's not maxed out. Yamato, all the tanks and Thors, the Vikings and Ravens can run forward. TY is in full retreat, panicking. TY just lost his entire siege tank Thor force on the ground. He's pulling back. He doesn't have enough Vikings. 7 Vikings queue up in a sense of emergency here. Maru only bringing a single siege tank. It's an almost pure air push here with these Battlecruisers. That's 7 Battlecruisers, but he's also got 3 more that'll be popping in about 40 seconds, and he'll be able to reinforce those into the fight as well. And we see TY. He locks down a few of the Battlecruisers. He says, sweet, let's take him down with these Vikings. I was talking about those Vikings. But remember, whenever those Vikings clump up to kite the BCs, Maru answers with his own missiles. He zones with a few auto turrets there. The BCs are getting dangerously close. If they get on top of the starports, TY is just going to lose his Vikings as they pop. He's trying to take them down. He's taking down a couple of the Battlecruisers. But look at this. Maru coming in from multiple sides. The missiles are going to land on everything. And with that one swoop of the BCs, he seems to have taken out the anti-air from the ground. All the Thors went down. And there's just too many Vikings here for Maru. There's still a ton of energy on these Ravens, but they just haven't even been able to drop all their spells. There's a few Marines on the ground trying to help, but Battlecruisers do not care about Marines. Not when they've got equal upgrades. These Battlecruisers are now on top of the starports. There's another 15 Vikings there. And it's such a slow, patient, drawn-out game. Completely split map. Maru just patiently swaps into Battlecruisers, realizes when his opponent doesn't actually have a big enough army and enough Vikings, jumps on him, and wrecks him. We're going to watch that last fight one more time, guys, because it's just such an interesting scenario where you look at it from TY's viewpoint. And let's look at TY's viewpoint. He's scanning. He sees tanks. He sees Ravens. He sees Vikings. Battlecruisers are hidden. Now, Maru does accidentally send some of his Vikings down to the corner of the map. Oh, actually, that was to kill a BC, wasn't it? That was it, yeah. But most of his BCs have not been spotted yet. And not just that, TY here, this is the sort of mistake that we often see from a player who is very good at the late game. Look at his supply. He's only at 175 here. And not just that, but he's built a lot of Thors, which are incredible, taking down Ravens and Vikings to some extent. But they're easy targets for the Yamato gun. The Yamato cannon from those Battlecruisers is just going to annihilate those. And the thing is, the Viking count is the big problem. Bring up that units tab. 20 Vikings. Remember how Maru has been sticking on a pretty crazy Marine count all game? He's been keeping pressure on with those. He's been making sure that TY is always a little bit worried about those ground units. You know, Thors are a little bit more of a multi-purpose anti-air unit. He's got a couple of Battlecruisers. He's still got an insane Raven count, but I would argue 18 Ravens is too many. In the long term, obviously spellcasters are where efficiency comes from. That's what TY is digging for. But the ability for those Battlecruisers to simply jump on top of your incredibly slow units, your tanks, your Thors, as well as your own BCs, Vikings, and Ravens, it's very, very dangerous here to be at 175 supply without that many Vikings. I don't think he realized there were Battlecruisers out. This BC went in for him, did some harassment. He was scanning, but he did not see those BCs, and he's just kind of like, that's cool, I'm going to edge in, do some damage. Look, my Thors are a real nuisance for you to deal with. 7 Battlecruisers blink on top, and it's just a Viking battle, really, that matters more than anything. I mean, the BCs managed to push in, and they're what kill the ground units, they're what kill everything else. In the overall army supply, there's not that much of a difference, don't get me wrong. But 5 Battlecruiser difference, that's huge. 7 Viking difference, that's also huge. Part of me thinks TY needed to be a little bit more decisive here in immediately running away and queuing up Vikings quicker. What we're going to see is TY in a little bit of panic. And he did freak out just a little and go, where's the Vikings? And he's trying to spread because he's so worried about these units so hot on his heels. He's trying to spam auto turrets to defend himself. But he's taking some nasty missiles. And he loses 1 or 2 Vikings in the retreat. And he's still thinking about fighting. And then he's building Thors. Still an easy target for those Yamato guns, and only then do the extra Vikings start up. I also think he needed to be much more decisive when he did fight, with a bigger spread of his Ravens to spam those missiles. The thing is, would it have actually won the fight? I don't think so. I think Maru just kind of looked at the unit counts that there's not enough Vikings in there. And that's why he pushes in so decisively here. Not just that, but look at the spreads. Every time a fight starts, Maru spreads his units out, moves a few Ravens forward in the center, and spams some missiles. And then he A moves forward, and he's going to keep respreading and hold positioning every now and then, and moving just a few Ravens forward to try and get those money hits. And if for some reason TY commits to a big battle, Maru's just going to spread in this huge arc, and he's going to crush it. He's just going to overwhelm like crazy. And he ends up coming in. And his arc isn't even that spread, because TY has gone so far back. But TY is so cornered and so afraid of Maru's missiles, he doesn't even bring half of his Ravens into the fight. A whole bunch of auto turrets on the ground, a few more anti-arm missiles, I mean, they would have helped. But Maru cornered him and put him in such a bad position where he just was not ready for this fight. He was not able to take him on. And what's so impressive about this is, as we said, Maru started with the double proxy barracks. Maru started off getting defended, having a counter liberator do a bunch of damage to him, and then he kind of just turtled for about 20 minutes with only small pressures. There was 2 Banshees that went across the map. There was a few squads of Marines that went out across the map that went roaming around looking for damage. Other than that, it was just the most patient focus on getting his upgrades, adding his expansions, adding his turrets, and going from there. GG's, well played. So we're going to be going into the next game as well, guys. Or not the next game, but the last game of the series to finish up this video. While I continue to talk about why Maru is such a freaking god and praise him. Because I think it's so worth everyone getting excited over. I think it's so fascinating to think of Maru versus Serral. I've heard players say Serral doesn't stand a chance against Maru. Maru doesn't stand a chance against Serral. But what's interesting to me is the thing is, like, it's just that old Artosis saying, guys. It's that old Artosis saying. There's nothing scarier than a cheesy player playing a macro game, and that's where he thrives. I think what made Serral kind of get to the next level as a player is Serral mixes in some all-in attacks, some really fierce timings. He'll do a Ravager Ling with like a Queen drop to kill the Banshee. Does these cool builds. It's great. It's awesome. That's nice. But he doesn't thrive in those situations and do them over and over and over again the way Maru does. Maru takes proxying his opponents and rushing them to a whole new level, where TY took the first 2 games in this best of 7 grand finals very cleanly, very decisively, and the smallest mistake in the 3rd game lost him that series. Any other player, when they're down 0-2 and they're doing the exact same cheese, they're the player who loses a little bit of focus, slips up on their micro, the rush doesn't work. Their really obvious plan that they keep repeating of proxying their buildings and rushing their opponent, it doesn't work out. Maru has this mystical ability to just do the exact same strategy for the 3rd or 4th time in a row, and then his opponent's the one that makes the mistake and dies to it. And you're like, what? How does that doesn't even make sense. That's absolutely crazy. But he does it over and over and over again. He almost always, throughout this grand final series, he did so many builds where he built his buildings on his opponent's side of the map. And here in the final game number 7, they ended up after that last map, that tied it up 2-2. They traded maps, 1 each. And we came through to this last map. And it's Atlas. So you've probably never seen this map. Comes out last in a best of 7 finals. It's a 4-player map. We see this when we have a 7-map pool. Both players normally have vetoes until the grand finals, where it's actually a potential full 7 maps. And it's the game 7 gets played. And it's really cool to see the matchup of builds here, because Maru doesn't go for anything crazy. He actually plays reactive here. When everything's on the line, Maru shows the slightest hint that he's actually a human being with hopes and fears, and not just a guy who will mercilessly cheese you with absolutely zero fear of, well, what if the dice doesn't come up in his favor? He doesn't have that fear normally, but in this game, he plays a very generic opening. It's just a 1-1-1, 2 Reaper Cyclone. He's going to go into an expansion behind it. And I feel like his plan is so reactive here. And this could be me projecting. Obviously, there's always, you never know what's going on in players' practice, on ladder, what they know going into the game. But to me, this looks exactly like I'm just going to open up with, the potential to put some pressure on, but we're just going to go fast Banshee off this. We're going to expand, and then we'll see what we do from there. TY, on the other hand, is not playing reactive. It's kind of a switch up from what their roles have been in this whole series. TY goes for a fast expand on the low ground, 2 Reapers, a Cyclone, and he's actually going to swap this factory and pump out more Cyclones and get a 3rd command center. This is like the classic build that dominated the meta in recent times, where it's just such a safe build, but it's also a very uninteractive build. TY is delaying his starport literally forever. He's only now scouting with his SCV to get his first glimpse of information in the entire game. Maru, on the other hand, is poking with these units to see what's going on. He wants that information. This SCV comes in, it says, okay, you're going Banshees, and you've expanded. It's a great scout there. Great scout for TY. But Maru still wants to know, what the hell are you doing? Jumps in, and this is the moment where Maru chooses exactly what build he's going to do. He sees no starport, he sees an engineering bay, and most importantly, he sees the factor on the reactor. Maru does not need to see this 3rd command center to know it's there. He jumps in to check that was an engineering bay because he didn't click on it the first time. That's why he went in there. He was like, wait, was that an engineering bay? He couldn't quite tell. So he went in and double checked. And this is interesting because Maru immediately says, okay, you're going to build a bunch of Cyclones. You're going to get a 3rd command center. You've got no scouting, no ability to interact with me, but you've got Cyclones. They're the best A-move unit. They're pretty much unbreakable, and that's what you're relying on. In the early game, Cyclones are incredible. They're good against everything. They're even going to do okay against my Banshee. Oof, my first Banshee gets shut down. Ow. But Maru's already decided exactly what he's doing. He's non-stop building Banshees, tanks, and Marines. He's going to continue poking and looking for bits of damage, but he understands the build TY is doing. And here in game number 7, even though he opened up reactive, and it seemed like, well, is he actually afraid of just gambling on a proxy? Is he afraid of TY shutting that down and it going like game 1 and game 2? But then he once again shows his trademark confidence, because what he's going to do is he's going to realize there is a window where your opponent stops building Cyclones, and they go for a lot of Marines, which are really great once you have stim and combat shields and a good number of Marines. But up until then, you're mostly just building lots of SCVs here. Now notice, he's just just poking around, confirming what's going on. The barracks are coming down. Stim's on the way. How many cyclones have we got? 5? But you know what? Let's pause. There's a push coming across the map. We'll talk about it in a moment. TY is not interacting with his opponent. He's purely defensive, and that is the weakness of this build. You cannot spot attacks coming. Not if there's Banshees on your side of the map, and not if there's Cyclones and Reapers poking around. TY only has these Cyclones and Marines to defend. Yeah, he's poking around his own base, but he says, cool, we've got 5 Cyclones. I don't want to build any more. Let's swap that factory off the reactor. He actually cancelled a Cyclone there because he has no idea this is coming. He has no idea what's in Maru's base. And the thing is, he can't really get any scouting out there unless he chooses to drop a scan, which he does not. So Maru says, you know what? Tanks, Banshees, Marines. With your build, you do not have great anti-air. You need to scan and lock onto my Banshees, which is shitty damage output. Banshees do crazy damage. If you do that, my tanks, my Marines will kill you. Now, over time, my army's not great. It's just tanks, Banshees, and some unupgraded Marines. But if I add bunkers into this, and I get sieged up on your base, you won't be able to break it, no matter how much you're outproducing me. Even with Stimpack finishing up in 10 seconds, I'm already going to have my tanks sieged. My bunkers are already going to be finishing. My Banshees already providing crazy fire support from above. And he just checkmates TY with this very decisive push that has very little follow-up. It's such a big risk to go for this sort of push. And TY is so close to overwhelming it by just pulling his SCVs, stimming his Marines forward. But a red hit point Cyclone, a Banshee, and 4 Marines are going to win the day here. 1 more tank and 1 more Banshee rally in, and Maru's going to take out TY. And TY is going to get taken out by this crazy push. His unbreakable opening is going to get shut down by a push he's probably never seen before. But Maru, he had this one in his book, pulls it out in game number 7. A beautiful, beautiful attack. It's so rare you see someone bunker rush an opponent. But when your opponent's going Cyclones, they are not siege tanks. They are not Vikings. And it's so, so important that he did huge game-ending damage here. Because guess what? He's just started his 3rd command center. No stim on the way. No second factory. No extra starport. Yeah, Maru's got 2 mineral lines of SCVs. 0 upgrades. 0 extra production facilities. If this doesn't pay off... Oh, he is so screwed. Why? Because Stim's done this. 3 barracks pumping 5 Marines at a time. He can make medevacs. He's got his own double engineering bay. His 3rd command center's finished. If TY deflects this attack, even being down 10 workers, TY would still be in a totally fine position. If he had been able to clear these units, keep his natural alive, he'd be totally fine because he's got Stim. He's got everything else going for him. And that's something where Maru's like, nah, man, I'm just going to go for this attack. Bet everything on this one super scary, super decisive push. Breaks through, wins the game. And that is why Maru is a god. It's because he does not fear committing to these attacks. He's a player who... We've seen him excel in wild situations. The number of times he's gone Banshee versus Protoss. Their first Oracle and Phoenix has tagged that cloaked Banshee, killed it before it gets a single probe, and we all go, ooh, well, he better do a lot of damage with his Marines and tanks moving across the map. I remember a game versus Patience on Acid Plant. Moves across the map. The Oracles go in. The Phoenix pick up the tanks. All the Marines are obliterated. The Stalkers and Sentries get on top of them. He loses his entire push. His Banshees have done no damage. He's got no production at home. He's dead. The funny thing is, he still wins the game. 6 minutes later, 2 Banshees, which he has masterfully dodged the Oracle and the Phoenix with, find their way into the mineral lines and kill 25 of Patient's workers while barely defending an attack on his side of the map using defender's advantage and winning the game. Maru pulls back these comebacks a lot, even when he's behind after these sort of pushes not working. But he also, when it doesn't go well from the mid-game, has shown he can beat the best TVT late-game player in the world, TY. Maru is now definitely, I think, undisputably the best late-game TVT player in the world right now after winning that Lost and Found map. And the fact that he's the best proxy double 14 barracks Reaper player, proxy reactor Cyclone player, which doesn't get enough damage and he ends up behind it and yet he transitions to normal games. He can do that shit and he is still the best late-game player. It's like, what is... He's unstoppable. Maru's ability to do all that is absolutely crazy. And that's why if we can get a best of 5 or a best of 7 between Serral and Maru, I will be so happy in a very special place because Serral's specialty is much more focused around the reactive game and the defensive game. He's not nearly as good at the aggressive, the wild, the cheesy plays. He mixes in the timing attacks, but he's not the same creature as Maru. So there's two different camps right now of the two favorites, I think, going to BlizzCon. There's the Maru fans and there's the Serral fans. I think there's a lot of other ones as well, but there's those two broad categories. And I honestly have no idea who's going to actually win when they come out. So guys, to finish up this little video, just showing off and rehashing this series, which, you know, don't get me wrong, this is not meant to be doing a better job than Tasteosis because their commentary was on point. I absolutely love listening to Nick and Dan talk about this series live, especially some of the ways, you know, Artosis put it, because Artosis is such a big TY fan, as am I. You know, I think I'm always on par with agreeing with Dan when it comes to TY being the late game master, the defensive master, the guy who, I think it was at the very start of this grand final series where Artosis said TY was the guy who shut down the 2-Rax Proxy Barracks Reaper meta. There was a meta where this was coming out 2 out of 3 games in TVT. TY was the one who made that stop because he showed how to shut it down reactively, just flawlessly. And it fell out of the meta and it became this very rare build, which Maru has recently brought back. And you know what? And others was kind of like, well, yeah, I mean, if there's anyone who can shut this down, it's him. And he was doing well at the start of this series, but it just felt almost like Maru's... He just doesn't seem to get as phased in these games as well. I'm sure there's a psychological element where he stays focused and he rolls with the punches and he just kind of... He seems to just accept every situation he's in the game with like no emotional resistance. Like you never feel like Maru, after his rush doesn't work or he's forced into late game where the Zerg has the entire map covered in creep and a massive bank advantage. You never feel like Maru's looking at that and he's like, oh, bloody... God damn it, I'm in this position. God, this is going to be hard. You feel like he's just kind of like sitting there and he's just kind of like, in this situation, I do this. And he just plays through what he knows is his game plan and smashes it up. And it's absolutely awesome. So we had a comment in chat said, it's textbook Wings of Liberty, TVT from Maru. TY didn't have the experience to counter this playstyle. That's an interesting way of putting it. You know, Lost and Found is a very powerful defensive map. It's also the map where Maru has shown he is the best defensive player in TVZ on that map. There's been like maybe 4 incredible comebacks in Terran vs. Zerg where Maru's been down 50 supply in that matchup. He tried to do it against Serral on that matchup and dragged the game out way longer than it should have gone after how ahead Serral was in that GSL versus the World tournament. It's absolutely insane. If you guys have any other questions, shout them out because we're going to answer a few more here before we finish up the video. Where did I get the replays? People keep asking. No, you cannot get the replays. No, I cannot share the replays. I'll see if I have permission to do other shows. Right now, I just have special permission to do this particular show, looking at these replays from Blizzard and the GSL Africa for sharing those replays. Not allowed to share them at all. I am not allowed to give them to anyone else. So, yeah. A few people are discussing the Serral Maru, who's going to win. And I definitely agree with the people there, guys. We've only seen a best of 1 between them in the second half of this year. It doesn't tell us everything. Serral got quite far ahead in that game. Some great Ling run bys got in and some great engages crushing Maru's first pushes. Serral was way ahead from there. We did not get to see the sort of back and forth game we might hope to, even though Maru dragged it out and tried to get back in it. Cool, guys. All right, thank you very much for enjoying this video. I just wanted to kind of harp on a bit about why Maru is so great. I think to summarize, if I had to play Maru, I would just be so frustrated as a pro player. So to finish, I want to point that out. Every player that's going to face Maru is going to have the same conundrum in their brain. When you go into a tournament and you're preparing, and when this happens at the WCS Global Playoffs, you as a player are thinking, let's put my opponent in a box. So first of all, you start by saying, here is a range of things that my opponent is capable of. I'm playing Haas. He's a cheesy player. He's going to proxy. He's not going to build that much economy. He's going to try and surprise me with tricky strategies. And that helps you kind of categorize the player. You then look for more specific tells. You study their builds and you say, if my opponent goes gas first, 9 times out of 10, he opens up Banshee. Whereas if he goes barracks gas, he usually opens liberator, and you can get these particular tells. And all these things allow you to kind of see into the future and almost cheat in the game, because you get this tell that doesn't necessarily mean the thing, but you've studied that player's habits enough to do that. The problem with Maru is his games always look different outside of the opening. As much as you can predict he's going to proxy 2 barracks Marine bunker rush you in Terran vs. Zerg, half the games, if not more. As much as you can predict he's going to double proxy Reaper rush you in Terran vs. Terran, or build his buildings out on the map against Protoss, he can vary what he does afterwards so much, and it's always very adaptive and reactive, and his micro never wavers. And it's one of these situations where even when you know what you have to do to stop that, you still need to micro flawlessly. It's like every single time you play against Maru, you know you're getting opened up with no room to warm up and get in your rhythm or your comfort zone. So every player going into it knows they need to start off at full speed in their series, or they will be giving maps away for free. They also know it's not a matter of playing someone like Haas, where if you just survive to the next stage, your win percentage goes up. If you survive to the next stage, your win percentage goes up further until there's no way to lose, right? If you guys have ever seen Haas in a 25-minute game, if the players actually have solid economies and solid tech, Haas can't win those games. He's just not good in them. Maru doesn't have that weakness. He's just as scary as Haas in the early game. I would argue scarier, but he's also going to kill you in the late game. So there's a pressure to end the game before a certain point against Maru, but there's also a pressure to play safe and try to just survive the early game. This creates threat from 2 different sides of the game, and any player going up against Maru is going to just kind of be like, all right, we've got to be on point at the start. We can't die to the rush. We've got to play safe against that. But at the same time, I can't let the game go too long because he's going to kill me down that end at the late game as well. And I don't think there's many people who are just like, no, I'm just good enough to beat him in late game. No, I'm fine. I don't think there's many that are just, oh, no, I will just crush his cheese every game. So every single player is going to be very, very afraid of exactly what's going on and how to deal with him. I think it's going to be a lot of pressure on these players, and it's going to be really exciting to see if someone takes him down, how they do it. We've seen a few Protoss players manage to find ways to counteract his proxy barracks recently in stats and SOS. Who's going to be able to do it at the BlizzCon WCS Global Playoffs? I have no idea, guys, but I'm excited to watch it. So thank you guys for watching this video, and I'll catch you guys next time. We can continue this discussion on my stream, twitch.tv/x5_pig, as well as you can hit me up on Twitter, x5_pig, if you have any questions, you want to counter-argue anything. I always love debating and discussing StarCraft. So thanks for watching, guys. I'll catch you next time. Goodbye and good night.